your preference would not be to go with one of the larger, Amazon-style ones. You would, so you do see, in terms of the size matters issue,
Yeah.
you would see that there is an opportunity for smaller operators, if you like, but in very niche areas. Is that right?
That's correct. I love to shop there, but I don't like it as a tenant, I would say, because just look at one of the largest facilities in Germany, Bad Hersfeld. They now, I think, occupy, correct me if I'm wrong, 120 down, 140 down square meter. And what happened, sure, it's nice to have a 10-year lease contract, but what happens once it matures? Amazon comes back and say, okay, let's drop the rent or moving out. It's built to suit. It's not from my view, it's not a third-party use you can apply afterwards. It's a huge facility. It's really shaped and built to the necessity and requirements of Amazon, and it's located in a, let's say, at a location which doesn't offer as much potential as we would like to see from a third-party use standpoint.
I think that there is a liquidity issue around something the size of the types of facilities that some of those e-commerce retailers are producing, and I won't name names or comment on specific units, but we definitely find right across the market there are liquidity bands in terms of volume. Below 15 million within the German market, for example, that starts to fall out of the domestic institutional requirement, and as a result gets priced slightly differently. Equally, once you get over 35, 40 million euros, again, that's a much smaller pool of buyers for individual assets, and that gets priced differently. And then the other type of transaction we're seeing at the moment is large aggregation plays and larger portfolios, which are typically 100, 150 million plus, diversified across multiple locations and tenants. For those larger deals, diversification by size is important.
You're absolutely 100% right. They are challenging, potentially challenging locations in the future, especially given they're fairly customized buildings. So they're hard to get your head around from an investment perspective. But think about e-commerce not as replacing something that already exists in terms of logistics. Think about e-commerce as incremental from a logistics perspective, because it is taking people out of shops, and effectively they're shopping in warehouses online. And online, people typically, well, my wife certainly does, people buy more than they do when they're in the shop. It's easy to tick that box, swipe the credit card, and off you go. But the reality is what we're seeing in the US is e-commerce starting to drive the need and demand for facilities closer to population centers, so smaller buildings, in order to be able to do same day or same morning deliveries. So whilst these large facilities may end up being necessary, given that we're at the embryonic stages, they probably will hold up better from a demand perspective with the likes of Amazon, but we'll see the next wave of development occur closer to the city, and it'll be a much more attractive investment proposition as well.
So will we then still have the same larger distribution points, but then leading into smaller ones closer to cities, rather than that the larger distribution points go?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, the concept of big, large regional distribution centres and then closer to population, more throughput buildings as opposed to storage buildings.
A lot of people also forget that a lot of the people who buy on the web actually return a huge amount of the stuff they buy. The statistic for ladies buying clothing is something horrendous, like 75% goes back. And I know for my own wife, that's exactly right, mainly because I make her. But when that goes back, it then has to go and actually increase the demand for warehouse, because it has to be checked, cleaned before it can go back in to be sold again. So actually e-commerce has been very good for logistics, not only in the Amazons taking it, but in the return, in the DHLs needing and the last mile distributors needing smaller places. So it's helped the market hugely.